So as everyone knows, over the last several years, there's been a lot of industry disruption, not only in automotive, but across various different industries. It's changed the way we look at things, changed the way we look at hotels with respect to Airbnb, changed the way we think about taxis when you're thinking about Uber, and more relevant to us, changing the way we think about electric cars with Tesla. But prior to that, back in 2007, there was a billion-dollar venture international company that started in Israel, but as I mentioned, was international. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So as Mike mentioned, we have Brian Blum that was nice enough to come out here and speak to us, and he's going to talk about his book, Totaled.
Thank you.
So Brian, if you can maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you all for coming. It's really great to see everybody here. And as I said to a few people, it's extremely exciting to see so many people holding a copy of the book. So thank you. I hope you all read it and enjoy it. It's a fun read, and you also learn a lot about what happened to this company, Better Place, that raised nearly $1 billion and was set to really become the electric car company, the one that was going to build the first affordable electric car. This was back in 2007, before Tesla was really going anywhere. In fact, when Better Place had raised, I think, its first $200 million or its first $300 million, Tesla was practically declaring bankruptcy. Elon Musk was putting in his own PayPal fortune to keeping the company going. The government was bailing it out. And Better Place kept going up and up and up. The founder was on the cover of Wired magazine. He was named Time Magazine's 100 most influential entrepreneurs of the year. It was a very, very exciting time for this company. Now, I'm originally from California, grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, moved to Israel, where Better Place was headquartered. I first got there 30 years ago. I've been living there as a citizen for 23 years. I work as a business and technology journalist. I write primarily about startups in Israel, but I also write about you guys. So I write about the classified advertising industry for a publication called Classified Intelligence Report.
Now everybody's probably wondering, what is a Better Place? So we do have a short video to show here so everyone can kind of get grounded as we make progress here.
Actually, before you play it, I'm going to actually give a little bit of background to it because otherwise you're going to jump in and you go, well, what are we looking at here? So can I give you like 1 minute?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, as I said, Better Place wanted to build the first affordable electric car, which in the case of this car meant $35,000. So it didn't mean $10,000, but 35, like the Tesla Model 3. And this was 2007, and battery technology could only go for 100 miles at most. I mean, the Nissan Leaf was also around in that time frame, 100 miles max. So how could you cover, the issue of range anxiety? How could you keep people from, worrying about, running out of juice in the middle of nowhere? So you could have charge stations, which Better Place planned to do. But their really radical idea was they proposed that you could pull into a gas station-like, switching station, and a robot would come in, take your spent battery out, and then put a brand new battery in. So that is what this video is going to show you, how the switching stations work. These were incredibly exciting. These were so exciting that people would take, and we owned one of these cars, so that's another reason why I got into this story. We actually would take people on a field trip. We would go to the switch station and say, okay, get out of the car. There was a glass wall. We could actually watch the whole thing, the robot coming in, the robot going out. It was exciting. And it worked. It didn't break down. Okay, Jason, let's see the video.
The electric car is the future of transportation in a world free from dependence on oil. Better Place took that concept further and developed the battery switch model, the world's most innovative and convenient way to allow electric car drivers to travel long distances without having to take long breaks to recharge. The battery switch is performed in a network of battery switch stations, which are located at strategic spots, much like traditional gas stations. From the moment you enter the switch station, advanced robots are standing by with a fresh battery. The fully automated system developed by Better Place works simultaneously to switch your depleted battery with a fully charged one. You don't have to exit the car, and you are constantly updated along the process. which takes even less time than it took to fill up your car with gas. Drive, Switch, and Go makes the electric car suitable for everyone. A car that can go anywhere conveniently and affordably.
We got a car that's more convenient. It goes as long as you want. It's not limited by range. It's not limited by time. It's cheap to buy. It actually keeps its value. The side effects, you save the world.
Drive, Switch, Go. It's as simple as that.
Well, I tell you, it really was exciting. Israel had and still has no electric cars other than Better Place, and as you can tell by the title of the book, the billion-dollar crash of the startup that took on big auto, big oil in the world, Better Place crashed, and Better Place is actually no more. There is no more company, and nobody else has come in. Actually, Renault is selling small numbers of the Zoe, which is, and they're selling the underpowered version. There are a few Nissan Leafs. There are no Teslas. A friend of mine just imported a Volvo plug-in hybrid. But other than that, other than like a few people that I know personally, there are no electric cars in the country at all. So when Better Place proposed to, put, hundreds of thousands of electric cars on the streets of Israel, everybody was very excited. The media was excited, and they built this amazing visitor center which actually turned out to be an old gasoline storage facility that had been decommissioned, and they were putting in, for some reason, they were putting in car lots and automotive dealerships in this area. So Better Place built a visitor center. They had a movie with a hologram, and they were offering people test drives, which for us was incredibly exciting. So we, as a family, one day thought, it was August 2012, we thought, what are we going to do? We've taken the kids to the beach, and we've been to the museums, and we've gone to the zoo, and we've gone to the water park. I know, let's go to the visitor center and do a test drive of an electric car. That's something to do fun for an afternoon. It was not meant to be something that we were going to jump into and buy a car, but we drove this car, and if anyone, if you know the first time you've driven an electric car, if you've driven an electric car, there's something magical about it. It's like there's no noise. There's no. The torque is amazing. There's no gears. It just zooms off like a jet plane with that whirring sound. And we all drove it. And at the end of that drive, we said, we gotta have this car. And 2 weeks later, we put our money down, and they'd ordered the car. It took another month before it got to us. Now, what happened is that the company then started running into trouble, and before long, the company was out of business, and that meant that eventually the switch stations were shut down. The charge spots, our charge spot at home worked, but none of the other charge spots worked, and we thought to ourselves, how did this happen? How did someone like me, a journalist who researches everything, that's what I do for a living. It's like, if I'm going to go on a vacation, I will look at every possible destination, every hotel and flight. I'll spend 19 days for a 12-day vacation. And don't get me started on a hard drive. It's like a $99 hard drive. I'll spend $3,000 worth of my time for this car. I didn't do any due diligence. Just fell in love, bought the car, company goes out of business, and it's like, uh-oh, I got to find out what happened. So I started talking to people, and I started interviewing people, and before you know it, I interviewed like 80 people, internal staff and car owners and investors, and the story started to become clear, and I wanted to tell it. So didn't intend to buy the car, bought the car. At the end of the day, don't have the car anymore, but I do have a book.
So what happened with the car? What was the deal after that? Was there any type of formal communication, or what can you do with the car at that point?
So Better Place built 42 switch stations in Israel, and they built another 18 in Denmark. They had operations, and they built another one in the Netherlands. They had operations all over. They had operations also in Canada, Hawaii, Australia, but the main areas of operation were Israel and Denmark. And we were in Israel, which was the focus. And the idea was that you would be able to go anywhere in the country. And Israel is an island. Now, it doesn't look like an island, but it's surrounded on all sides by either water, the Mediterranean Ocean, or countries with borders where you can't drive your car. So you really could drive within a defined area. You could go from the north to the south. It's about 500 miles maximum, I believe. Might even be less than that. So if you put 42 stations, in the right places, you could switch batteries along the way, and everywhere would be accessible. That was what they were building. When the company went out of business, however, we couldn't switch our batteries anymore. So now we had a car that could go 100 miles. And as you probably know, electric car batteries degrade over time. I was at the LA Auto Show at the Automobility Conference earlier, actually just yesterday, and one of the speakers, I think it was from Lucid, said that what they've discovered is that even with the very best electric car batteries today, he didn't name the company, but I think he was talking about Tesla. He said, 200 chargers, 200 fast chargers will degrade the battery by 30%. So you'll have only a 70% capacity. In the Better Place case, that wasn't a problem because you were always switching batteries. If the battery degraded below a certain point, then they just retired it, and then you got a fresh battery. So you always knew you'd have at least 85 or 90% capacity on your battery, which was great. But when the switch stations were gone, we were stuck with our degrading battery and our car that, at first we could get to the airport from our house in Jerusalem. Then we could get to the city of Modi'in. Then we could get to the city of Beit Shemesh. And then, we took it for grocery shopping. Which was hard because the car, and I think we might have a slide to show this later, but the car was a refurbished or revamped version of an existing car called the Renault Fluence. The Fluence was in design. It was an upgraded version of the Megane, M-E-G-A-N-E, M-E-G-A-N-E. But the Fluence was already in production. So what they did is they just re-engineered it. So they took out the gasoline tank in the rear and put the battery essentially in the trunk. Took up 2/3 of the trunk space. So when I say it's hard to go to the grocery store, it really was. There was no room in the trunk. But that allowed them to get a car to market in 3.5 years, which is great, and that helped Better Place launch quickly. Was it the right car? Probably not, and people were not very excited about it. So when the company went out of business, we had a city car, and we were frustrated, and about 250 of us actually sued Renault. Now, we didn't sue Better Place because Better Place was out of business at this point, but we sued Renault. We didn't sue them for our money back. We sued them for replacement batteries. What happened is that we loved this car. I mean, people who have their first electric car, they fall in love with it. And we didn't care that actually it had this terrible range and it was, not a great, looking car. It wasn't a spiffy Tesla. It didn't look like a Bolt or a Volt or, it looked like a 5-seat, sedan that had a big battery in the trunk. But we loved it. We didn't want to get rid of it. So we wanted new batteries. We sued Renault for a new battery so we could keep driving the car. And Renault said, we don't have any more batteries. We're not making the car anymore. We've moved the entire facility from Turkey, which is where they were making the car, to South Korea, where the car is still sold without a switchable battery, but with a fixed battery, as the Samsung SM3. So if you go to South Korea and you see a car called a Samsung with a plug-in spot, that's our car. Anyway, at the end of the day, after about 3 years of this lawsuit going on, Renault says, we're not going to get any more batteries for you. We'll offer you 50% of what you paid for the car. And we thought, if we don't take it, we might have to pay someone to tow the car away. So we took it. And that is how, at the end of the day, I wound up, after 4.5 years of driving a car I loved, driving a gasoline-powered car again, and waiting for the next electric car. And I still have my charge spot in the garage, waiting for that day. It's not plugged in anymore. There's no electricity, but someday. I'm still a believer.
So after all of the bankruptcy stuff unfolded and you got inspired to write this book, can you tell us a little bit more about the process and the research and the interviews that took place? I know there were some fascinating stories that you shared with me, and maybe that's something we can...
Absolutely. It's great to talk about the process of writing a book like this. It took me 3.5 years to write the book and to do all the research and to, and I guess we're still in that 3.5 years because I'm doing the tour at this point. But among the people that I interviewed were some really fascinating characters. Probably the most interesting person was this guy here on the slide here. So on the left is Shai Agassi. He was the CEO and founder of Better Place. On the right is Idan Ofer. He was the first investor. So Idan Ofer was, at the time, Israel's richest man. He was worth $4 billion when the two of them met. By the time I wrote the book, he was worth $6.5 billion. Today, he's worth a little bit less. He's had some problems with his finances. But so these two guys met, and they met in Idan Ofer's penthouse, apartment, and they had a conversation. And at the end of the conversation, as they're going down the elevator, I mean, this is amazing. It's the classic example of an elevator pitch. Idan Ofer puts his hand on Shai Agassi's shoulder at the bottom of the elevator as the doors are opening and says, "I'm in for $100 million." And that was the beginning. That was the very beginning. Now, a few years later, I went to go interview Idan Ofer in that same penthouse. And it was, I've never been, I don't hobnob with multi-billionaires. But this apartment had a view of the entire Mediterranean Ocean, from the old city of Jaffa all the way up to the north towards Lebanon. He had his own private butler who was serving us cookies. And we sat for 3 hours. It was completely open, completely candid. The two of them at this point did not get along. At the beginning, I like to call this a bromance because they were like joined at the hip. It's like Idan Ofer invested the money. He believed in the company. By the end, he was the one who wound up firing Shai Agassi, the founder, when the company was running out of money. It was clear that the company wasn't selling the way they expected to. But and so he was very candid, didn't have a lot of kind words to say about Shai at that point, unfortunately. But at the very end of the 3 hours, the doorbell rings. It's like, so the butler goes over to the door, he opens the door, and in walks one of Israel's former prime ministers. Wow. Okay, and I'm like, okay, I've never met a multi-billionaire before, and now I've never met a prime minister before, but I'm shaking his hand, he's asking me questions, who are you? And about 3 months later, he went to jail. Yeah, he was convicted of corruption in a real estate deal. So that was a great story. But it was filled with these kind of things. Another person that I met with really wanted to tell me his story, but it's like he didn't want anybody to know who he was, and didn't want everything was secret. So we met in a mall. This is going to sound like deep throat, but we met at a cafe. We're sitting there, and he's like looking around. He's not sure he wants to talk to me. He's sussing me out, and finally, he agrees that he's going to talk to me. And he reaches down into his bag, and he pulls out this 8-gigabyte disk-on key, his thumb drive. He says, "This is yours." And then he shook my hand, and he left. And on that were like every email, all the PowerPoint, all the financials, everything. I was like, wow. It's like, I can't tell you his name because the mall management would kill me.
How did you build up enough trust for him to want to give you that?
It took me about 3 months of sort of sweet talking him over time to, and he won't say sweet talking. He'll say, we were just talking, but eventually, I convinced him.
What were some of the competitive advantages that Idan and Shai thought that they had with Better Place?
So the main competitive advantage was that you were going to be able to drive anywhere with the technology of 2007, and that it was going to be an affordably priced car. Really, affordably priced meant free, and that was something that Shai talked about a lot in presentations. He would say, this car, is going to be so attractive and so inexpensive. He would say this to other car manufacturers. He'd say, you should just take your cars, off. Just stop making them. He had a lot of, we call it in Israel chutzpah, okay? A lot of hubris. And he would say, just stop making these cars because with my free car, you're going to, not be able to sell any of your cars. Now, how could he make a car for free? So the Better Place model was that Better Place wouldn't make money on selling the car. In fact, Better Place didn't make the car. Renault made the car. Better Place then resold the car, but they made a few $1,000s. Their margin was very tight. They made money by adopting a cell phone model to cars. They sold miles or sold kilometers or electricity the way that you would sell minutes on a cell phone plan. So, for example, we paid for our car about $150, $175 a month. That gave us 1,000 kilometers, so about 600 miles. After that, we paid 55 agorot, which is about 15 cents, 20 cents a kilometer. And we could switch batteries, indefinitely. We didn't actually have to pay for the battery switches. That was the model, and that was going to then generate enough money that the company would be able to make a ton of money. The company ran into trouble. Obviously, the company ran into trouble because it's no longer there. But the company ran into trouble because, more than anything else, the money coming in from the subscriptions was not enough to cover the burn rate of the company and everything else involved with it. And now I'm going to give you a number which you're all going to go, you kidding me? Okay, but or maybe not. Maybe the burn rate at Kelley Blue Book and Cox Automotive is much higher. But this was a company that was supposed to be a startup. Okay, it was supposed to be a new company that lean and mean, all that stuff about startups. But by January of 2012, they were burning $1 million a day. Okay, they had 1,000 people on staff. They raised $200 million at the beginning of 2012. Now, I can do the math, and you can all do the math too. $1 million a day, $200 million in the bank, that lasts until about October. Shai Agassi was fired October 2nd. The company had 3 weeks left of cash in the bank. Idan Ofer put $100 million emergency injection right in at that point, which kept the company going for another 9 months. But at that point, they just didn't have the money. And the money from the subscriptions, the thing that was so painful about this was the money from the subscriptions would never cover the burn rate. Because, among other things, and this is going to sound crazy, I mentioned the car cost $35,000. That was the affordable rate. But that did not include the battery. So among the many innovations Better Place had, switchable batteries, subscription model, they kept the price down by keeping the battery out of the sales price. So you bought a car with an empty slot. The battery was owned by Better Place, which was actually really good because it meant that when the battery was getting below its capacity, they just swapped it out and you got a new battery. You never had to worry about replacing your battery, paying a few $1,000s for a new battery after a few years. So it was really a good thing. But that meant that Better Place, in addition to spending $3 million for each switching station, $1,000 to install each charge spot, which they had estimated much less, they had to pay for all those batteries, $15,000 each. So the business plan had this great idea. Why don't we take all the batteries that we're going to be selling? We know we're going to have guaranteed income from the subscribers, so we'll bundle up the batteries like mortgages. All right, and we'll sell them to investors. Okay, this was, let's see, the year 2008. Anyone see a problem? So the investors did not go for it. In the end, Better Place was able to split the difference with Renault, but they still had to come up with $7,500 per car. So that ate away, any profit margin. Then there's the burn rate. It just, there just was no way. So the company sold more cars. And now I want to ask you, how many cars do you think the company sold? And if you know, then you can't answer. But anyone have a guess? How many cars do you think they sold in a couple years of operation? 300. 300. A little bit more.
I think you said earlier.
Did I?
Well, you said how many people sued the company.
No, we didn't all sue the company. Some people didn't sue the company. There were 250 people. You're right. Okay, so I misled you. They sold 980 cars. 980 cars in Israel. They expected to sell a lot more, but it didn't matter. They could have sold 10,000 cars, and then they just would have lost more money. So one question you will probably ask me, so I'll just jump the gun, which is, is there any way that Better Place could have been saved? Okay, here's a company that really was very promising, and people were excited, and they loved their cars, and it raised all this money, but the model wasn't working. Could it have been saved? I think yes, but it wouldn't have helped me. Okay. Well, no, because what happened, Better Place had an operation in China. Now, it wasn't doing much. It was just a visitor center, but they had a lot of excitement. Investors were interested. China had a mandate, even stronger than in California to, go electric, quickly. And I believe, and this was actually what the CEO after Shai believed, that they could pivot and move operations to China. They would have had to close down the Israel operation. I would have been still left without my switching stations. I still would have been upset. That's why it wouldn't have been good for me. But the company might have succeeded and continued on. Another thing that they could have done, they could have switched the model to taxis. In fact, and one of the questions that people usually ask, and so I will again jump the gun on that one, is people say, what is Shai Agassi doing? What did he do after Better Place? One thing that he did was he tried to start an electric taxi company in London, not in Israel. He learned his lesson. Israel wasn't the best place to try to do this. He tried to do it in London. It didn't take off. Don't know why. I wrote about it. Various journalists in Israel wrote about it, but it didn't take off. But the idea would have been like they were doing in the Netherlands, that you could have a taxi running, say, from the Schiphol airport to Amsterdam, and when you got back to Schiphol, you would switch batteries, and then you do it again and do it again. And they did this in Tokyo. They had a demo in Tokyo. They did it in Amsterdam. That would have been a way to keep the vision going. Again, wouldn't have helped me, but but I think we Israelis would then have been able to hold our heads up and say, our technology, or this company that was on the cover of Time magazine, succeeded. Instead, you guys mostly never heard of Better Place, but in Israel you mentioned Better Place. It's like.
So given that automakers are betting big on electric now, right, with GM looking to have 9 all-new electric by, 2023,
right,
and then BMW having about 25 new all-electric or hybrids by 2025, what are some lessons that you think can be learned if they use that as a case study to make sure that they don't fall victim to similar case that
and it's a great question because Israel was really sort of like a countrywide beta study. Like we put the whole country open, to test what people's tolerance would be for, range anxiety, and would they like switching stations, and would they be willing to switch after 100 miles or 200 miles, or what do people want? So we got a lot of data, and that's actually one of the positive things. But I actually do want to show a video.
Somebody asked me to stand up. Stand up! Okay, all right. This is the boss's tailor, see? And the fellow goes in to buy a suit, and he's looking at himself in the mirror like this, and the jacket's hanging way down like this. And the tailor's over his shoulder. He says, how do you like the suit? The guy says, pretty good, but what's this hanging down? Hey, what are you worried about the hanging down? He just pull a jacket up like this, hold your chin over the lapel like that. It's gorgeous, see? So he's walking down the street like this, and a friend of his meets him. He says, where'd you get the suit? What, they give you a ukulele with it or something? What's the matter with it? He said, look how it flares out on the side. This you don't even notice. Back to the tailor, he said, what are you worried about the flaring out? You take the jacket like that, hold your hand across your stomach. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Now he's walking down the street like this. Meets another guy, and the guy says, run for the hills with that suit, kid. They're going to capture you. He said, what's the matter with it? He said, what's the matter? The pants are too long. Back to the tailor. What are you worried about the pants? You hold them like this. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Now get this, Gorgeous is walking down the street like this, see? And 2 doctors go by. One of them looks over, he says, I don't know what's wrong with that fella, but don't the suit fit nice?
From the old Dick Van Dyke show, where Maury Amsterdam was one of the writers on the sitcom that Dick Van Dyke worked on, tells a joke about a guy who goes into a tailor, and he gets a suit, and the tailor makes the suit, but the arm is too short, and the guy goes back and says, the arm is too short, and the tailor says, no, you just gotta pull it down like this and hold your arm like that, and it's so beautiful, gorgeous. So he walks out, and he realizes now the pants are too long, on the right side. So he goes back into the tailor, and the tailor says, no, just pull your pants up like this and hold your shoulder like that. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And this goes on a few times, and eventually he's like walking down the street. It's looking like a pretzel. And these 2 doctors are walking by, and they see him all like that, and they say to each other, I don't know what's wrong with that guy, but don't the suit fit nice? Okay, I tell this story because that is the problem that we found with Better Place, and I believe it's the problem that we continue to find with electric car companies to this day, including Tesla, including Chevy, including everybody else, which is that we don't have battery technology that works the way that people want it to work. And what we learned in Israel is that people, they don't want battery switches. It's inconvenient. You have to stop every certain period of time, and the switches, even though they work, sometimes they're not located on the main road, so you have to drive off for 5 minutes, and if there's somebody in front of you, it's only one lane. So it could be a whole endeavor. It's like to go from my house to a lot, you'd have to switch 3 times. And if it took you 20 minutes to switch, it should only take you 5 minutes. But if it took you 20, you just added an hour to your journey. That's not getting the latest, greatest technology. That's trading down. And people don't want to trade down. They want convenience the way they have with the gasoline-powered cars. They want to be able to stop at anywhere that they need, where ubiquitous like gas stations, plug in and recharge in 5 minutes. And if they can't recharge in 5 minutes, they want a battery that goes for at least 1,000 miles. No electric car company today can go 1,000 miles or recharge in 5 minutes. I took a test drive yesterday of the Nissan Leaf, the new one that gets 180 miles at the show. And afterwards, I asked him, I said, okay, so what if I want to drive this, long distances out of the area? He says, oh, we've got, fast chargers, I said, so how fast is it? He says, 30 minutes and you'll get 80% of your charge. And I know Tesla is something similar, maybe 30 to 40 minutes for, 80% of your charge. And I said, but I don't want to stop for 30 minutes. I want to plug in and go. Oh, it's no problem. You stretch your legs, you get a cup of coffee, you get a saison, and I'm thinking, Maury Amsterdam, down the super price. It doesn't fit. It's not what people want. The good news is, if you're following technology, there are a lot of companies working on better batteries. Some of those are in Israel. Some of those are, like Bill Joy, co-founder of Sun Microsystems, really loves a company called Ionic. It's not Panasonic. It was, I think, Toshiba's got a technology that they're working on. I haven't actually heard a lot of them getting down to the 5 minutes. Some of them are getting down to 15 minutes, maybe 12 minutes. But we'll get there. We'll get there. And when we get there, then we will have a tipping point where I think electric cars will really take off. Now, that doesn't include what happens with autonomous driving and whether or not, that will tip things in a way that's different because the autonomous cars can plug in themselves. That could completely change the scales. But when I left the Better Place story, the conclusion I had was better batteries will make all the difference. And that is the key lesson for the vehicle business today.
So what's next for you?
Next for me. So I had a lot of fun writing this book, even though it ended badly. Not so badly for me, but badly for the company. So I'm now in the process of looking for my next book project. So what I would say to all of you guys here is that if you know an entrepreneur, an innovator, a technology, or even an entire industry that would benefit from sort of being given the research and narrative treatment that the full-length book could have to bring the story to light or to make it really come alive, contact me. I'm the guy.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Now we'll open it up to questions.
Yes.
So I was wondering that I think you mentioned for each of the switching stations it was like $1 million or something. Are those stations still there? Did they dismantle them? Did they sell them? Like, what actually happened to all of their assets when they dissolved?
Great question. We do have a slide there. If you one on the left is me in front of the former Jerusalem switching stations. You can see there's no tracks, there's no robots, there's no glass. It's basically filled with trash. That asset, all the assets are remaining. They haven't been closed down, but they're just piles of rubbish at this point. The one on the right is a new use for a former switching station. You see on the right is the Better Place logo. You can see the word place. On the left, what are they selling? Tombstones. That's unbelievable. It's like they're selling the end.
better place.
The one on the left, by the way, what you can't see is the location of Jerusalem switching station is just next to the main cemetery in Jerusalem. And originally I wanted to call the book, but my agent wouldn't let me. He said it was too depressing. I wanted to call it Gone to a Better Place. But I think total is better. Yes.
Was the Israeli government funding any of it? Were they involved at all? Incentives or anything? How much were they involved?
Great question. So the Israeli government did not help in a big way, but what it did help with was it reduced the import tax on electric vehicles substantially. Now Israel is very expensive to bring a car in. The tax on gasoline-powered vehicles is 78%.
Wow.
Okay, so that $35,000 car that I mentioned for the electric car, that's also the cost of my Toyota Corolla. It's also the cost of my Honda Civic is a $35,000 car in Israel. So $35,000 for the electric car. It's a little complicated because it should have been less. Because for the electric car, the government put a tax of only 8%. So huge discount. The problem was that Renault looked at that price and said, you know what, we can get more. And we spent, we spent X amount on R&D, and we also have a gasoline-powered, fluids on the road. We don't want to cannibalize sales, so they jacked the price up. The price that came to Better Place was literally about $3,000 under the $35,000, total. That includes the VAT and other kinds of taxes, but there was no room. And I have to say that it could have been less if Renault had been more forward-thinking and said, you know what, we'll sell a lot more cars if we just, make this a loss leader for our other vehicles that are coming down the way. But they didn't. So there were incentives. What there were not is there were no incentives for parking. So there are no reserve spots for electric vehicles in Israel, which meant that if you wanted to plug in a mall parking lot, which people tried to do because you'd driven from far away and you were going to be there for a few hours and then you could get home, there would be other cars always in the electric car spots, and you would have to wait until somebody left, and that could be a while. There's no discounts for driving in the carpool lanes or anything like that. In Norway, my wife and I took a vacation to Norway a few years ago, and we were shocked how many Teslas we saw on the streets of Oslo. In fact, I went and looked it up, and I found out that the Tesla was the #1 selling car in Oslo that year. This was, I think, 2014. Not of electric cars, but of any cars. And the reason why is they did the same thing. They reduced the taxes. They gave free parking, free electricity, free use of ferries and bridges, which are very important in Norway. And it worked. There were Teslas everywhere, but Israel did not help.
Just out of curiosity, how many times did you actually go to a switching station when they were there?
So we live in Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv is 70 kilometers away, so about 140 round trip, not including driving around inside town. So if we went from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, we always had to switch either there or on the way back or both. We don't do that much because I actually have an office at home, so I work at home and my wife works in Jerusalem. So most of the time we did not. I'd say when it was working, we switched once or twice a month. So and that's important. The switching stations were not really meant to be the primary form of charging your car. They were a psychological backup. You would charge at home, you get your 120, 140 kilometers, and that should be enough in most cases. But if you needed it, they were there. But people, when the switch stations were gone, they were freaked out, now I can't go anywhere. That was true. Although I'll tell you a quick story. This is all in the book, and it's really a very interesting story. But the range of the battery was not what Renault initially thought it would be. They thought that the battery would get 180 kilometers, maybe 160 kilometers on a charge. Sorry, I'm doing kilometers because that's what we use in Israel and Europe. I don't know the exact translation. But the reality is that we really got about 120 kilometers, not more than that. The switching stations on the road from our house to Eilat. Eilat is the southernmost tip of Israel, and it's on the Red Sea. And we would drive by way of the Dead Sea. Right? That's just the way we go. Down to the Dead Sea, then we go along the Dead Sea, and then through the desert, and then we get to Eilat. There was a switching station at the northernmost part of the Dead Sea, and then there was another one at the southernmost part of the Dead Sea. The switching stations were 160 kilometers apart. Right? Because they were built when the assumption was that it was going to go for 180 kilometers. But when it would only do 120, we couldn't go that way. So I called up the customer, after we bought the car, of course, I discovered this. So I called up the head of customer service, and I told him my problem. And he said to me, well, you couldn't go by way of Beersheba, which is another city, which is like an hour the wrong direction. It's like, here we go, morning Amsterdam. My suit doesn't fit one. But there was a woman, who I interviewed who lived at, close to one of the switching stations in the kibbutz near the Dead Sea, and she had an electric car from Better Place, but she couldn't drive south because it's still beyond her range. So I said, what do you do? Oh, well, we have a cable in the trunk. We drive to the hotels near Masada. There's a bunch of hotels there. We know where there's an outlet. We plug in the outlet. We go in, have a cup of coffee, hang out for a couple hours, and then we have enough juice to get us to the switching station to switch batteries. Yeah.
I think you may have answered this, but when you were talking about Shai starting his taxi business, you said that Israel didn't turn out to be a good place.
Right.
And then he went to London. So I was just, why is it that Israel specifically wasn't the right place?
Right. So Israel has gotten a reputation in the last 10 years. It's called the Startup Nation. There's a book called The Startup Nation that talked about why Israel's been so innovative, and there are so many startups, and we have more startups on NASDAQ than anywhere else in the world. I mean, we beat every other country. We're 8 million people. I mean, we're smaller than the San Francisco Bay Area. We're much smaller than the LA area. So how did that happen? So I'll let that book speak for why Israel became a startup nation. But there was an assumption, I think, on Better Place's part. I think everybody had this assumption that Israelis are, innovators and early adopters, but we're not. We're actually, the average Israeli is very conservative. We don't take chances on anything. The tech world is our early adopters and innovators, but that's 1 million out of the 8 million. Everybody else, we still have to send faxes. Okay. I mean, that's crazy. If I have to get a medical referral, it's like I got to send it to the HMO through fax. It's like the same. Anyway, so what happened is that Israelis would have adopted this technology more readily if it had been proven somewhere else first. But Better Place actually looked at Israel as the test case that would prove it for other places. So it was kind of the wrong direction. And I know it sounds crazy and counterintuitive, but we still love that car.